We're glad today to hold this interview with the director Russel Redl from USA. It's an honor for us. And tell us more about yourself, please, about your past in cinematic world, and how did you come up with the idea to connect your life with this?
That's an interesting question, actually, because I think every film or screenplay I've ever worked on has been a personal project, whether it's taken from my own life or from somebody I've met, or something I'm interested in that I want to develop further, or anything like that. I tend to put a lot of myself into my work.
Thank you so much. And also, can you tell us, please, about the work that you submitted to our film festival?
It's called Luma Was Here, and at the moment it's in screenplay form. I'm getting it translated to comic panels as my storyboards, and from there it'll go into pre-production. It's essentially a rendition of a vampire story. Instead of there being creatures, though, it's about how memory, and in particular memory tarnished by trauma, can be vampiric, and how it can feed off of memories, but also off of a person's vitality. And basically, it comes down to the main character is looking to get over her pain of losing people, and she decides to use blood magic to contact them one last time. And using her traumatic memories, she basically bleeds into a cup and drinks it, and it sets her on a path.
Thank you. And also, my next question will be, was there a personal experience that drew you to this narrative?
Extremely personal, honestly. It comes from trauma of losing people in the past, and how that's affected my life, and uh, how it's also affected other people in the past, that are family members in particular, and dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and grief and all sorts of things like that. I just wanted to more or less create a story that I could use serialism in conjunction with that trauma, and telling the story of this particular version of what vampirism means was like not just personal, but it was also meditative as well.
Thank you. And what moment made you realize this had to become a film?
Almost straight away, but at the same time, is I like to dwell on my things. So like it took me about half a year to write, which is like one of the longest amounts of time it's taken me to write a script, but it just wouldn't go away. And it just gnawed at my mind, kept me awake for days and days on end, and I just couldn't let it go. So when it got to the final draft, I just knew it was something that I really wanted to make.
And if we're talking about inspiration, maybe there are some directors that were inspiring your visual approach to the story.
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. Because I come from a strongly film background, and like growing up, I was always watching the weirdest stuff, even when I was a really young kid, things I shouldn't be allowed to watch, like David Cronenberg's work, and John Carpenter and Stanley Kubrick and those types of people. But the real influence behind this particular one, if I had to name anybody at all, it would definitely be Clive Barker.
Which particular movies maybe we can recommend?
Well, Clive Barker's the guy that did Hellraiser.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the idea of like using the body as a temple, The only difference between his work and my work is I didn't want to go graphic for the sake of graphic. Like I say that almost derogatorily because people that are actually fans of Clive Barker's work will lynch me up, I think, if I don't clarify that. But it's sort of his is more about sexual gratification and that sort of thing, whereas mine is more about dealing with trauma, like I said, and with heartbreak and with deaths in their family and that sort of thing. It's not as disturbing as what Clive Barker's stuff can be, but I sort of always been a fan of his books and Hellraiser and like Midnight Meat Train, that kind of thing. And I sort of wanted to go down that route, but in a way where it was like not horror, but more like that sort of personal connection.
Thank you. And let's talk about your script. How did the script evolve from the first draft to the final version?
Actually, I hadn't written a screenplay in a little while, and I wasn't sure I was actually going to write anything because I've been working in comics for the last like 4 years, 5 years now, and I've actually been finding a lot of satisfaction in that. But this one sort of came out because I originally went to a seminar for writing, just to basically just for fun, to make sure that I kept up with the process and all that sort of stuff. And out of that, this script sort of came because it was like it was almost born a uh from an exercise that we had to do during that seminar. And I went home and I just couldn't shake it. And after that, I spent like I think the next month after that doing the script in my spare time, which for me is like not that much time. But after I had that first draft, everything just kept spilling out of me. It was almost like I was cut open and I couldn't stop it from bleeding.
Okay, thank you for your for sharing the story. And also, if we're talking about the idea of your film, do you believe in the ability of art to reveal truths that are difficult to manage in real life?
I think it'd be pretty ignorant not to believe that because I've seen time and time again that movies do have a healing power. It's just like writing a novel or a comic or anything. If you believe in it enough, or if you use genuine self within your work, you can't help but touch on something that other people will get something out of.
Yeah, thank you. I feel the same about that. And also about your art, about the challenges that came up while you were making this project. Are there was some like the most challenging task that you faced during making this film?
Getting the money is definitely the first one that comes up. It's always a challenge. You walk into so many rooms and you pitch the project to people. Like it doesn't matter whether it's professional businessmen that you're talking to or just family members. No matter what you, no matter what you do, there's a certain disconnect between an artist and a normal person that doesn't do anything creative. And finding that link, that bridge between what you want to do and their wallet is really hard. But then there's also being able to realize what you've got. Like you've got to sit down for ages just planning. Like even if you after the script, that you still need to sit down and do the shot list, and sometimes that will take ages. Like I've spent months developing things before. Like when I was doing a film a little while ago in 2021, it took me about 6 months to come up with the shot list for that. And this one wasn't anywhere near as hard as that, but it always takes that extra time to do the visual prep and to make sure that you hit the nail on the head because like you don't the last thing you want to do is create a story that is good on the page but doesn't translate well to that visual medium. And after that, the other challenge I've been having is just mainly time, mainly time because like, when you work a full week, you don't really have a lot of time. So coming home from work and working on a passion project is challenging enough, but I feel like if you've got that discipline there and you really want to make something, and this is partially why I've always worked on things that I've put myself into personally, is it's easier to stay on track if you fall in love with the project. Because the last thing you want to do after an 8 to 10 hour day on a normal job is to come home and work more.
Mhm. And you need to have this balance, and you managed to do that so well. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Well, thank you.
And also, if we're talking about some happy accidents during filming that made it into the final cut, can you share it with us?
I sort of can. Um, so originally this wasn't actually supposed to be a vampire story. It sort of was meant to always be a story about trauma, but I was watching an interview on YouTube quite by accident, and one of the things that the person on the interview was talking about, because it was a interview on psychology, and they mentioned that internal grief can eat away at your soul. I'm not exactly saying it the way that it was said, but to paraphrase it, it sort of it unlocked doors, and it was sort of like that key that I needed to make it just that extra bit more like not spectacle, even though it sort of brings a little bit of spectacle with it, but it brings it a lot more depth, and it makes it more original in terms of like everyone's sort of seen a movie about trauma, whether it be about like legit straight out trauma from like child death or from like losing a loved one in any way or whatever, or as like spectacle driven as like Batman, for example. You have like all these characters that are born from trauma, and there's like not that many ways left that you can really do a film about that topic. And having my story about memory as a vampire I've never seen done before. So, and that was really born out of just listening to other people speak about loss and grief.
Mhm. And if we're talking about your personal approach and maybe some discovering about yourself, is there something you discovered about yourself while making this project?
I I definitely used it as a sort of therapy in that like before I did it, I'd never written so truthfully about myself, and which is kind of funny because the comic that I'm working on is very much my semi-fictional autobiography. But this one project, Luma Was Here, was I think that extra step of being personal, and because of that, it helped almost exercise some demons that I had, like maybe like not necessarily self-esteem, but more how I saw myself and how I could pick up on more people being able to see who I was and how I was able to really exist in a social setting, things like that.
And how did you find your main characters?
Um, well, the main character is almost based on me. but then the side characters are based on people I know, not necessarily to the point where it's like 100% factual. Like one of the characters in it is actually a legitimate vampire who's been living for a century, and he's based on my best friend who is gay. So like I use LGBT almost like not in that kind of way where it's like the character is LGBT, but in that sort of way where they're the ultimate outsider, and so using that aspect as a means to be able to tell something about um something that is real, but in a way that is also very fictional.
And you talk with your best friend about this character, or maybe he guessed that it was based on his story.
Well, originally, when I was speaking to him about it, because he joined me at the seminar, and he was like, "You're writing again, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yes, but I don't really have anything solid yet." And when he read the script, he was like, "This is just me," and he sort of clocked it straight away. And I was like, "Yeah, well, I mean, because he's an actor as well, so I sort of in part wrote it for him, but it was also not having that connection with him was part of a very big part of why I wrote that character, but also how I was able to write that character.
Hmm. And how can you describe your film in 3 words? It can be adjectives.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Putting me on the spot here. Um, 3 words. Hmm. I can think of four,
You can
but
use
three
for.
are
It can be exception for you. So,
But I think the 4 words that I'd use is don't leave anything behind.
mhm.